So if I remember right, we did end last time with our conversation about group cohesiveness, and we talked about how um, cohesiveness really deals with four basic types of elements, and one is group size, which when it comes to therapeutic and psychoeducational groups, the recommendation is between 6 to 9 participants. Once you get above those levels, the groups become less cohesive, less interactive, and the like. And so um, some psychoeducational groups can go up to 12, maybe 13, but it's really recommended that the group size maintains under about 9 individuals. When it talks about managed diversity, when we talk about this, it's about making sure that everyone understands where each group member is coming from, and that none of us, even if we're dealing with a single subject type of group, such as cancer survivors, domestic violence victim survivors, or if we're talking about PTSD or addiction types groups, that everyone comes from a different background, and each one of us should respect that background. Group identity. This is one of the issues. You'll notice that in our syllabus, we're going to spend about 1 or 2 class times talking about identity with groups. And this is important because sometimes with group identity, individuals can, and we often do as part of human nature, take it to an extreme level, meaning that we may be only identify as a person who is going to AA. So Alcoholics Anonymous is what defines us as an individual. It's what wraps us into anything else. It is quote unquote our savior. It is quote unquote the only reason I'm still alive is because I am a member, or I identify with my co-individuals that go to AA. And so we need to talk about, as facilitators, that fine line we need to draw between individuals who identify with the group. It's very important, but we also need to make sure that individuals maintain a sense of their own identities. And you'll notice I use identities as a plural version of this term, because a healthy identity is having multiple identities. It's making us see and making us invest in not only being in rehab, okay, that's good, but also our identity as a brother, sister, a son, a child, a mother, a father, a worker, a co-worker. Man, how many more identities? Man, woman, or non-binary. Let me think of more identities. Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, atheist. All of those are also a very important part of our identity while we're going through the healing process. So making sure that our group participants don't only identify with members in the group, they identify with the multitude of other individuals who are in their life becomes a very important part of healing. And then success, recognizing when not only individuals, but members of the group have successes. People have good weeks. People do the right thing. And we when successes don't always lead to, let's say, example, not relapsing, but recognizing that when the individual who may have relapsed, they did some successful things along that journey, that they also were successful. And I just want to emphasize this point. Success isn't what is the term? Isn't earning first place. It's not getting the gold. But if by each week a person is getting the bronze and the silver, maybe even before the bronze, it might just be participating in the contest. That maybe instead of drinking 7 days out of the week, they only drank 4 or 5. Those are all successes. And in our modern terms, and I know this is strange to a lot of us because we all grew up in this dominant American culture, we have to recognize that those are successes, that being first place isn't always the ultimate goal, but at least trying and getting to the bronze and to the silver are also very important successes. So what do these 4 things do in the group cohesiveness model? Well, it brings up the level of participants in the group. Again, going back to the successes, if you have someone who was drinking 7 days out of the week and they came to group and said, I made it through 5, celebrate that as much as the person who didn't drink at all that week. And I guarantee every group member will participate in that group that week. Okay. Levels of conformities to norms. So this is when group people are treated the same. Those who's had small successes, those who has had large successes, they will all fall into those rules that you and your group members agreed to. Emphasis on goals accomplished. And again, this goes back to success, manage diversity, and group size, is that there becomes no difference between the person who remains sober for 5 days versus the member who was sober for all 7 days. Because we're all accomplishing something. We're all at different levels and we're all at different places. Okay, so I just want to kind of bring those ideas up. Now, the thing that you want to prevent, because if we go back to, we're going to go back again, sorry. The problem with these things, and we want group cohesiveness, but the problem with these things is also, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Okay, is that the things that help you bring a group together can also make it so the group becomes very complex. And that those 4 things can also bring up the issue of what's called groupthink. And this is the desire to agree is so great that it dominates concerns for realistic appraisal of alternative courses of action. Too much cohesion or domination of the group by a few leaders can create what's called groupthink. This is where the group starts to think as a organic individual, even though there might be 6 to 9 individuals in that group. And this is very easy to create when the facilitator only gives power. I'm going to use the word power in this, to 1 or 2 group members, maybe 3 if the group is large, like a group of 9. when you as the facilitator only agree with a few individuals in that group and you cherish their successes and minimize the small changes in other people's or other individuals in that group, you can create what's called groupthink, where everyone, despite reality, despite what may be going on in their actual world, they sit there and just agree with those few. So when we think about group cohesion, remember that you as the facilitator are the one responsible for managing that. And the only way to reduce group thinking like just one or two of the individuals in the group, is for you as a facilitator to make sure equal weight is given to everyone, despite their successes, their failures, their education, their healthiness of their social relationships, whatever that may be. Making sure that you give voice to every single group member is how you prevent this thing we call groupthink, where everyone just starts to agree with the 1 to 3 group members who tend to dominate and get the group facilitator's attention. And this kind of summarizes something that we've been talking about, is the productivity, excuse me, I can't talk all of a sudden. Productivity controversy is that we have this assumption, especially in our individualistic mindset here in the United States, that the people who are doing the most are producing the most. I'm going to say that again. In our individualistic culture, which we all are a part of, whether we're indigenous or we're not, whether we're white skin, brown skin, black skin, we all have this tendency towards this individualism, that we give attention to the few individuals that seem to be doing amazing and are quote unquote the natural leaders. All right. And they tend to seem as the individuals in the group that are the most productive. You've got to fight this issue when it comes to being a facilitator in a group. You've got to fight against this notion that individuals who are successful because they're doing better. Okay. And I just want to put this out here right away. As facilitators, we have to fight against this individualistic attitude that some people do better than other people's because they are better people. Okay. The also known as creative abrasion. These are just the different terms that have been used for why we give some people more weight than others, and we have to fight these things. So there's creative abrasion, value different points of view. The thing that I would be careful of, if you ever go to a training and anything and the presenter goes, I want you all to speak up because I value all of your points of view. Leave the room. They're not valuing anyone's point of view. They're looking for the best point of view. They're looking for those who will agree with them. So if you if you ever have anyone in a group setting or anything saying, oh, I want to hear from all of you, leave. I promise you they're doing it with malintent, and it's not going to be a productive session. One thing is facilitating creative problem solving. So this is one way to combat groupthink, is if a facilitator says, okay, So one group member says, this is what I did, and another group member says, well, if you were me, this is how I would have handled it, blah, blah, blah. As a healthy facilitator, this is what your comment should be. Thank you, John Doe 2. That's an interesting perspective of how you would have solved that problem. But can we get the other group members in the room to say, what would have you done in this situation that John Doe 1 was in? What would have you done? Irrespective of what John Doe 2 said, what would have been your approach? And that's one way to reduce group think. Task related conflict is good, personal is not so good. And this goes back to the point number 2, when the group member says to John Doe 1 says, I have this issue, I relapse. John Doe 2 says, well, if I was in that situation, I would have done blah, 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 blah. That's bringing up personal is not so good idea in this 5th bullet point. When a group member only uses their experiences to determine the experiences of everyone else, that's when you, as a facilitator, I'm just going to put this blunt, are failing. We should use personal experience to say, hey, have you tried this? This is when you know you have a healthy group, is when your group members, instead of saying, well, you should have done this, blah, blah, blah. But if you have group members said, you know, when I was in that same situation, I did this and it helped me a lot. But do you think it would have worked in your situation? When you have individuals doing that kind of conflict resolution, instead of the group members' personal experience dictating what other group members should have done, that's when you have a healthy group. I'm not sure if I'm making this point clear, but when clients use their personal experience to dictate what other group members should do, you have an unhealthy group. On the other hand, when you have group members say, this is what I tried in my life and it worked for me, this may just be a strategy you might consider. You hear the two different terms in this situation. I'm hoping between here's my experience, try it on, try the shoes on, versus, well, if you did this, this would have not happened. That's the difference between a healthy group and an unhealthy group. And this also comes down, I'm just going to go back to here again. We've looked at conformity. And I want to get to the adjourning phase because that's where we kind of left off in our last group. But I wanted to emphasize a few points. Okay. This is also an important quality of a good facilitator. Okay. A good facilitator does not go into a group situation thinking they know what each of those group members should be doing in their life. And I'm going to be completely honest with this. I cherish and honor you all who are going into this field because you had personal experience with addiction and mental health issues or any of those types of things, whatever, domestic violence or anything. I admire you having your experience motivate you to go into this field. But if you are going into this field because I was an addict, and I think if everyone did what I did to not be an addict, you don't belong here. Go into engineering, computer information systems, or some other effing boring field like that. Do not go into this field. If you are going into this field because you wish everyone would do what you did because you were successful in overcoming your addiction and overcoming your issues and everything else, you do not belong in this field. Get out, change your degree aim between semesters because that's what they do it. Go into computer information systems or some other field where you're not dealing with people. I'm going to repeat this because I've had hate email from students before. And usually after this lecture, I get a few emails from the dean, and I'm okay with that. I'm going to say this again, one more time. It's awesome if you're going into this field because you had experiences. You went through addiction, you went through domestic violence, you went through trauma, you went through some mental health issue, and that's what motivates you to be in this field. But if you are going into this field thinking that if people do what you did, if people would just model you, and they no longer will be addicts, they will no longer be victims, they will no longer be this, get the F out of this field. I don't want to see you in my class this coming Thursday. And I'm hoping I make this clear enough to all of you. I don't want to see you here on Thursday. If you think people should follow your path to your sobriety, to your healing, to your way of being, because this is a waste of time on my end and a waste of time on your end, and you're going to create more hurt and pain for your people who you are supposedly trying to help, but rather you're just bragging. Okay. So just saying that, email the dean if you need to, email whoever. If, oh, Dr. Peterson said, oh, I'm going to be a horrible provider because I want to use my experience and my place and help people become better because of what I went through. F you, get out of the class. Don't come to one of my classes ever again. So that point being made, and I hope it was made strong enough, everyone's path to healing is different. And that is the trick for a facilitator doing group work, is making sure that you make sure that all of your group members give their experience and what they went through, each one of them. So if there's a single group member who has 7 different experiences, they can tag to one, or they can tag from a couple, or they might tag from all 7 of them and go, wow, all of these people's experiences, I can take something away from each one of them to improve my own life. But once you get to the point where everyone is following one single individual, your group's going to fail. I'm going to say that again. Your group is going to fail. There's no one individual with the success. If you go on with your bachelor's degree, you'll take a group techniques class at a 300 and 400 level, and they're going to say stuff totally different than I did. I'm just being honest. Because we're not all the same. We all have different situations. We all have different places. We may need 7 to 9 to 12 stories before we realize our own. Anyways, I got on a soapbox. I apologize, everyone. It's been an issue. I noticed this over the weekend when I went to a thing, and I've been kind of on a soapbox about this issue for a while now. But okay, I'll get off. I'm stepping off my proverbial soapbox or my proverbial Facebook post or uh, whatever you may want to call it. But please, everyone, don't assume one individual has the answer for everybody. That's my point. Okay, so let's talk about the adjourning phase of um, groups. So when you look at the adjourning phase, this is when the group has come to a point where they're no longer becoming an effective group. They're kind of getting to the point like, why am I here? For an example, I haven't relapsed in like 3 weeks. I've gotten into a healthy relationship. Why do I still need to come to this group? Blah, 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 blah. This is what we call the adjourning phase, where productivity of change starts to go down. Okay. And I just want to bring up a few things for temporary task force teams. This is always a thing that will happen once you give that final product. We're like, why are we meeting still? This is very common for things like anger management groups is an example where you meet for a certain amount of sessions. And then if you keep those sessions going, it actually kind of makes the clients worse because they're like, we just covered this like 10 weeks ago. Why are we rehashing these things? Okay, this is an example of a task force or temporary team. When we come to like psychoeducational group, anger management type groups, those kinds of things. But even with therapy groups, we can get to a point where it feels like we're just doing it becomes a monotonous thing. I have to go to this group because, probation, parole. I have to continue this group because if I don't, I won't get my insurance and my employer will fire me. This is something we have to recognize as group facilitators when a group comes to its natural end. Okay. So we know that adjourning or separation comes when tasks don't even have anything to do with what we're talking about in a group. So, for example, if I'm doing a group on addiction, and then all of a sudden, all my group members are talking about relationships or how to keep a job or anything like that. I know the purpose of that group has come to its adjourning phase. Disengaging from relationships where individuals who were close group members start saying, I don't want to be here this week. Do you want to be here this week? I'm not going to interact. Okay. And the other thing is a journey isn't always planned. So we may have a treatment modality, let's say cognitive behavioral therapy, where we're going through thinking errors and all those kinds of things. And we recognize that the group members just are not engaged, that they're going, we've done this before, we've already talked about this, and we're just not engaged in it anymore. Recognition for performance and give closure. So these last two are what do we do when we transition from adjourning to letting members go. So I'll bring up a father's group that I did, recognition for performance and give closure. is, and I think I mentioned this either in the last class or a class before, one of the adjourning things that we did is we didn't give out certificates. We gave individuals the opportunities to show that they can have a fathering opportunity. So we did a grill, right? We had 4 or 5 grills outside. They came and did hamburgers and hot dogs, whatever it may be, and they served them to their children and either partner or grandparent, some other adult. In some of these situations, the romantic part of the relationship was over, so we had grandparents or an uncle or an aunt come along as well. Hence, that's why they probably were in that group. Okay. Um, and that was recognition for them. That was their trophy. That was their certificate of completion, giving that moment of here, I've changed. And that's what the recognition of performance and give closure should be about. It shouldn't be simply just giving them a certificate with your signature and the executive director's signature on it saying that this person completed this group. Congratulations, he or she is done. If you want to be an effective facilitator, make the end of the group more significant than just a simple certificate. Okay. Maybe turnover of members rather than adjourning. So this is often happens with open-end groups. And so along around the 10th to 16th session, you might notice that some members are just not showing up anymore, and some members are just joining anymore. And when you have a significant amount of individuals leave your group, so let's say one week you have a group of 12, and the following week you have a group of 6. And then the following week, all of a sudden you have like 4 or 5 new people. That is when you need to do a reset for your group. You have to start with stage 1. And you have to go through this whole group process again. Because when you have a significant of individuals not showing up, but then have another group of individuals all of a sudden showing up, that's when you need to sit and say as a facilitator, okay, we need to start over from stage 1 and move from that point on. Okay. All right. I'm going to end this section with just a statement about culture and the effects on groups and whatnot, because definitely some of us will be practicing in what's called monolithic cultures, meaning that we might only be treating individuals that, for example, come from our tribe. Some of us might go to metropolitan Phoenix or metropolitan Tucson and have all kinds of different individuals. And even within the Tucson Phoenix area, some people may only practice. For example, here in Tucson, you go to the north side, most of your group members will be white. You go to the south side, you're going to have a mix of Mexican Americans and African Americans, darker skin, browner skin. If you go more south to Tucson. And so dependent upon where you live, you're going to have different cultural effects on a group. Okay. And just as this mentions, I'm just going to bring this up in a Tucson example. If you practice on the north side of Tucson, you're going to have a difficult time with the individualistic culture that is more predominant in the north side of Tucson, where people feel like their success and their failures is because of them. It has nothing to do with the community. It has nothing to do, I am my successes and I'm my failures, okay? You're going to have you're going to have to do more relationship building with that type of mindset, then you are going to do this. And I promise this, the first time I facilitated groups, it was in Idaho, which at that time was 96% white Caucasian Americans, and getting them to share in the group setting was very, very difficult. It was hard to get them to engage each other. And the majority of my work was spent on getting them to talk with each other. But if you then get into, and I'll bring this up in the Tucson area, if you get more into the southern areas where you have more Latin Americans, more African American, they're more what we call collectivist groups, meaning that our success is all of our success, all of our failures is all of our failures. And they don't state that, if I suck or if I'm successful, it's because of me. No, they're more likely to say, I'm successful or I suck because there's this environment that is collective among us that creates this. In these environments, group cohesion comes very quickly. They're 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 more used to working in a collective group environment. Okay. But this also brings its own challenges. So in the individualistic cultures, you're dealing with trying to get people talking. In the collectivistic cultures, you're dealing with individuals that are more susceptible to groupthink. So someone else's opinion is what I should be doing. And so, and this is the importance of cultural effect. I'm bringing up extremes, extreme collectivist versus extreme individualistic, but making sure that you spend some time in looking at your group dynamics. And this is why on intake forms, we ask people to identify what culture, ethnicity, or race they come from. And a lot of people go, we only collect that information for, grant reasons. The grantor wants to know who we're serving, or we only do that because, it's part of our funding and being able to uh, uh, charge insurances and those kinds of things. But no, these questions actually do have relevance to your own group setting. Okay. Is that you want to look at those and go, okay, I have this mixture of traditionally white Caucasians, Europeans, and I have this mix of Latin Americans or Native Americans, and I just should put in here as far as culture is most Native American cultures are more collective than they are individualistic, unless they want to reject their Native American heritage and want to be fully quote unquote American or United States, which is a whole nother conversation that we'll get into this coming Thursday when we talk about social identities. It's a very unhealthy perspective to come from, but we'll talk more about the complications of identity this coming Thursday. My point being here is we just don't ask those questions to put it on a survey and say, oh, this is why this person is this way, this is why this person is that way, because they come from the Philippines versus England versus Native or anything else. No, we're trying to identify how should we approach this group, because if we have a largely individualistic group, we're going to have to work harder as facilitators to have them recognize their own, recognize that it's okay to be a member of a group. If we're dealing with collectivists, it's okay to have your own identity independent of the group. And so that's the point on culture. All right, I'm going to escape here. And I'm going to stop sharing. And I know I did a lot of soapbox stuff today, and I apologize. But I'm going to stop recording and just ask